So, Matthew 24 and verse 9. Here the tone changes a little bit. He says, they will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you. Tribulation is a key word. Okay, it's quite different from the sword, famine and plague that we've just been speaking about with wrath. This is tribulation. Tribulation is persecution of believers because it's for my name's sake. Okay, so this is something that Christians or believers can expect. Okay, Jesus said, in this world you will have tribulation. Take heart, I've overcome. And Thessalonians says that we're appointed to tribulation. This is something which is part and parcel of Christian life, and we should expect it. And indeed, the apostles rejoiced when they were found worthy of suffering for the sake of Jesus Christ. Okay, and we see that that's part of the portion of the early church. Nearly all of the disciples died as martyrs. And so this is what we're talking about. This is persecution because of faith. That's quite different from wrath, which comes from God against the ungodly because of their unrighteousness. This is persecution that comes from the world because of our faithfulness. So you can see that wrath and tribulation are quite opposite things, and they shouldn't be mixed. And this is why this is quite a different tone. This is very much addressed to what the believers should be thinking about, while the sword, famine and plague are being inflicted on the rest of the world, but not on Christians, I hasten to add. Okay, it says here that many will be offended and the love of many will grow cold. Okay, so because of this persecution, of course, there is a falling away. There will be people who turn against God. They will give up. But the call to persevere is there. He who endures to the end shall be saved. Again, telos, fulfillment. Stick with it until the end, because if you will do this, and the same expression is used in Matthew 10 verse 22, then there is a reward for you. Okay, there's a reward if you will endure to the end. Don't give up, don't be offended, don't grow cold. Instead, serve the Lord. Okay, it also tells us that believers will be here until the end. Okay, not 7 years before, but we'll be here right until the end. And that's very important to actually understand. Otherwise, what on earth is Jesus talking about here? Why is Jesus warning people about something that won't happen to them? Of course, it will happen to us. Okay, and that the end is emphasized after all of these things. All right. Now, there's a specific sign here. The abomination of desolation. The abomination is something which is associated in Thessalonians with the man of sin, and so therefore, that some people call him the Antichrist. I prefer the term man of sin. And here we have, a specific sign, and it's at this time that we get great tribulation. So clearly, it becomes very intense. Now, you'll notice that I write great tribulation with small letters, small g, small t. Because it's not an event. It's not the Great Tribulation with big G and big T, or with a the. It's a description of what's going on. It's widespread persecution. It's dreadful persecution. It's not an event. It's something that's going on during these other events, okay? But we can't really pick that up and then use that as a label for the whole thing and call that the Great Tribulation, especially if you're trying to include the rest of Matthew 24, because as we saw in the last passage, it was about wrath. Wrath and tribulation are two different things, and so I can't relabel something tribulation when actually part of it is the wrath of God, because that's not tribulation by definition. It's totally different. And we need to separate those two things out, and you'll find that as we go through, things become a lot easier to understand if you don't separate them. All right. To emphasize that it's for believers, it's for the elect's sake that those days are shortened. Okay, these are believers. It's not the chosen people of God like the Jews. It's elect. It means the believers. Even when elect is used in conjunction or in relation to Israel, it's usually talking about those who are believers, the remnant, the people who belong to God, as opposed to just national Israel. So let's put this into our chart. We've got persecution, and we've got the fact that believers are there for the end. Let's just stick with the main events. We've got the abomination and the man of sin and the great tribulation. I said didn't I? Should be just there is great tribulation. Okay, so let's put these into our chart and start building up our list. All right, so the list is going on. We've got false Christs, we've got wars, famines, and pestilence, which we saw was the wrath of God. We've got persecution now, particularly associated with the abomination of desolation, and this is when we have the Great Tribulation. And then we move on to the next passage, which is actually a continuation.